Prometheus.
Universal basic income is becoming an increasingly popular policy in the political cycle right now. And the main reason for this is the candidacy of presidential candidate Andrew Yang, who is an Asian American entrepreneur from New York. Yang declared his intentions to run for president back in November of 2017, but he didn't gain political traction until February of 2019 from his appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. Since then, UBI has become a policy that both sides have entertained. I'm actually surprised that this idea is even gaining traction among conservatives. But when you actually look at the more modern history of UBI, you actually find something quite interesting. In 1962, the godfather of Chicago school economics, Milton Friedman, was even in favor of this policy. He called it the negative income tax.
The proposal for a negative income tax is a proposal to help poor people by giving them money, which is what they need, rather than as now, by requiring them to come before a governmental official, detail all their assets and their liabilities, and be told that you may spend X dollars on rent, Y dollars on food, etc., and then be given a handout. The idea of the negative income tax is to treat people who are poor in the same way as we treat people who are rich. The virtue of an income tax arrangement is precisely that it treats everybody the same way.
But you also have Martin Luther King in 1967, the year before he was assassinated, also endorsing this policy. He called it the guaranteed minimum income.
Now, one of the answers, it seems to me, is a guaranteed annual income, a guaranteed minimum income for all people and for all families of our country. And it seems to me that the civil rights movement must now begin to organize for the guaranteed annual income, begin to organize people all over our country and mobilize forces so that we can bring to the attention of our nation this need and this something which I believe will go a long, long way toward dealing with the Negro's economic problem and the economic problem which many other poor people confront in our nation.
So this is one of those issues that surprisingly has bipartisan support. But the bipartisanship fades once you talk about how to implement it. Conservatives believe that UBI should be implemented as a replacement for the welfare state, while progressives believe that you should not have to sacrifice the welfare state in order to implement UBI. Andrew Yang actually takes the middle ground here. He actually makes UBI an opt-in process, meaning that if you have welfare benefits already coming to you, you would have to forego those benefits in order to get $1,000 a month in universal basic income. Even though it's the middle ground, it is more in line with the principle of the conservative implementation of UBI. The only difference is Andrew Yang does not want to get rid of Social Security and Medicare. My support for UBI goes so far that it has now ended my support for a $15 minimum wage. Now, I agree with the principle of a $15 minimum wage, that we need to raise wages in this country, but I am now seeing the effects of what happens when you have a $15 minimum wage instituted in society. I take a look at cities like San Francisco and Seattle. These are two cities with rampant homelessness crises, but they're also two cities with the $15 minimum wage in place. And judging by what is happening in these cities right now, it seems like the $15 minimum wage is doing nothing to help the homelessness crisis. In fact, it may be exacerbating it. Now, I'm not some hidden conservative or anything. I am a full-blown lefty, which is what makes this realization so hard. The things that the left believes would help the people that end up hurting them only drive these people further into the hands of our political opponents. Now imagine if these homeless people had $1,000 a month, which would equal $12,000 a year. they could end up getting two of their friends to move in with them into an apartment together, which would basically mean they're no longer homeless. However, if an employer is forced to pay $15 an hour in wages, that increases their overall operations cost. So in order to keep a lower cost margin, they're probably going to have to either cut shifts, fire employees, or fully automate altogether. And it's not outside the realm of possibility that these type of conditions could end up increasing the homelessness population. Now, in all 100% honesty, it's not like I haven't heard these arguments before, back when I supported the $15 minimum wage. But the problem is the conservatives did not have a remedy for the people that were working in low-wage jobs and couldn't afford a decent standard of living. But now that UBI has been introduced to the mainstream and actually young conservatives and libertarians are in favor of it, the right can actually battle back the Fight for 15 movement without looking like uncaring sociopaths. Even progressives get flanked on this issue now. Andrew Yang actually made an appearance on The Jimmy Dore Show. Jimmy Dore is definitely one of the more firebrand lefties here on YouTube. There's things I agree with Jimmy on and there's things I disagree with him on, but when it came to this interview with Andrew Yang, especially during the part where they were talking about UBI versus the $15 minimum wage, it exposed a gaping hole in the left's argument.
And for a minimum wage, what are you for, the 15 or the 20 or the 25? Are you for one of those?
Well, I'm for 100% for the spirit that no American should be working full time and not be able to pay their bills. But the reality is, if we move to a $15 minimum wage, there are many, many small businesses and industries like fast food that would probably end up getting rid of shifts and workers. Because if you have a fast food restaurant that's paying people $9.25 an hour, and then you say it's 15, then they're going to look around and be like, it's like robot burger flipper time, or it's like self-serve kiosk time, which might be okay. But I'm suggesting that if we put $1,000 a month into people's hands, then that serves as a virtual raise for every worker. It makes workers much harder to exploit. It actually rewards mothers and caregivers who right now a minimum wage would not impact. Like a freedom dividend is much, much broader and bigger, and then we can turn to a minimum wage, but the need for it goes much, much lower because I'm essentially giving everyone $1,000 a month raise, which would raise the effective minimum wage to close to $15 an hour anyway.
Okay, so Yang basically starts out by laying out his case for a UBI instead of a $15 minimum wage. Now, it's a very good case, and one thing I even noticed that Andrew Yang did was that he actually talked about workers being harder to exploit with a UBI. This basically shows that Andrew Yang has done his research on who Jimmy Dore is. Jimmy Dore, throughout his show, has always talked about the exploitation of workers done by corporations. But now pay attention as we watch Jimmy Dore completely short-circuit on Andrew Yang.
So, okay, well, I don't agree with that because, that idea that if we raise people's wages, they'll automate them. They will automate them if they can. They're not doing that because they're nice, right? Or because they would, if they could automate their jobs right now, they would do it right now. And that the only reason
that is generally true.
Yeah,
but so it is possible that if you change the economic incentives to automate something, it might become more appealing.
Right. Okay. But I like to bowl. We don't have pin setters anymore. It's not because they tried to get more money for pin setters.
So you could see that Jimmy Bot over here was struggling to come up with an argument. It was like he got punched in the face. So after Jimmy and Yang come to an agreement that businesses would automate if they could, Yang clearly points out that it is because of economic incentive, which makes Jimmy Bot short-circuit yet again. And of course, Jimmy comes up with a very poor argument of the bowling pin setters, which ironically supports Yang's argument because bowling alleys automated the pin setter jobs because the overall cost of automation was cheaper for the bowling alley in the long run. Okay, now this next segment here is when Yang pulls off something completely bold. See if you can catch it.
Okay.
It is also true too, though, Jimmy, that like if you look at like some struggling mom and pop retailer around the country, like a lot of them are paying their workers like $9-10 an hour, and then if you say, hey, it's $15, like some of them might cut back shifts or some of them might struggle. Like I've run a small private company, and a lot of these small businesses are really, really close to, like the red at any moment in time. And something that seems like completely common sense to us, being like, hey, just pay people $15 an hour, actually would cause some of these businesses to say, you know what, I'm gonna have to cut a shift or cut a worker at the margins. So again, I just rather just give people the raise directly, and I think workers would prefer that too. If we just put $1,000 a month in your hand.
If you're a fan of the Jimmy Dore Show or have watched his videos frequently, you would know that Jimmy Dore is a very caring person when it comes to the poor. But Yang completely outflanks Jimmy on the issue of struggling small businesses, and in the process makes Jimmy's argument look completely elitist. And you know what? Okay, I'm gonna say it. I actually love how I paused this exact frame right here. I mean, the look on Yang's face is priceless. It's like, yeah, this guy thinks he can beat me in a debate about business? Okay. Now it's time for the knockout.
I mean, again, the UBI is you're correct on that, and you're incorrect on the other stuff. Businesses hire when there's a demand for their product. End of sentence. And if there's a demand for their product, they got to hire a worker. And nobody's going to go, boy, I have all these orders, but I can't pay that guy $15, so I'm not going to fill them. So that's illogical. That is a right-wing talking point. That is not how economics works.
Businesses are not flourishing at that level. If they're just living hand to mouth, and they don't have the orders, and they have a hard time even paying the people they have, if you elevate those costs, it might in some situations mean they cut shifts or cut workers. I mean, that is
not economic theory. That is sound. That is right-wing talking points. But
ding, ding, ding. That is the 10 count, ladies and gentlemen. So Jimmy desperately tries to save his own argument here by overestimating the concept of demand. Yang rightfully points out to Jimmy that not all businesses have that kind of demand. And a lot of these small business owners can't afford the cost hikes. And I'll say it again, what we witnessed here was debate magic. Jimmy Dore has always been this compassionate guy that talks about the poor and the downtrodden and opposes the corrupt elitist oligarchs. But Andrew Yang's debate style ends up making Jimmy look like an elitist asshole. I mean, it was so bad that if you look at the comments section of that video, the overwhelming number of comments were in favor of Andrew Yang. Okay, but now I'm going to finish this video by going for the throat. I'm going to make the only argument that really matters here, the money itself. So to start things off, we have to look and assess that the federal minimum wage is $7.25. And when you translate $1,000 into a 40-hour work week, first you divide it by 4 weeks in the month, and then 40 hours a week, you end up with a total of $6.25. So $7.25 an hour federal minimum wage plus the $6.25 an hour you would get with the $1,000 UBI, you end up with a total wage of $13.50. So not exactly $15. So if we calculate the yearly salary of an employee making $15 an hour, we multiply 15 times 40 times 4 times 12, and you end up with $28,800 a year. So let's calculate how much of an hourly income you would need to match the $15 yearly salary with the UBI. So first let's take $28,800 and then subtract it from the $12,000 a year you would get in UBI. Then you divide it by 12 months a year, then by 4 weeks a month, then 40 hours a week. You end up with $8.75 an hour. Basically $1.50 greater than the federal minimum wage. So while this may sound like it's a real case for the $15 minimum wage, here's where the UBI policy starts to look more attractive. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the most common job in the U.S. is a retail salesperson. And the average wage of a retail salesperson is between $10 and $16 an hour, with the average hourly pay of being $13 an hour. So according to the numbers, if you only need $8.75 combined with a $12,000 UBI to match the overall yearly salary of an employee with a $15 minimum wage, the average wage of retail workers at least on the very low end of $10 an hour, already exceeds the total salary you would receive if you had just bumped all the wages to $15 an hour. But you know what? Let's speed this up. Here are the average wages for all of the most common jobs listed in the Bureau of Labor Statistics that are underneath $15 an hour. Remember, this is the yearly salary of an employee making $15 an hour. The total is $28,800. So these are the total wages of the 5 jobs I mentioned earlier. And factored in there is the $12,000 a year UBI. The only job that seems to not meet that criteria, even with the UBI, is the fast food industry, which has a total yearly salary of $28,070.40. So the only real difference between the UBI and the $15 minimum wage in the matter of a fast food employee is just slightly under $730. But here's a factor I haven't thrown in yet. Say this employee also has a wife and a child at home. Under the UBI, the wife would be qualified to receive $12,000 herself. So let's add another $12,000 to the numbers, and holy shit. Apparently the average median household then goes over 40 grand. And this is with the traditional 1950s nuclear family model, where one parent works and the other stays at home. So I'm really looking forward to this continued debate between the UBI and the $15 minimum wage, especially when it's going to be happening on the debate stage between Andrew Yang and Bernie Sanders. Now, there's going to be some people trying to throw out the idea that we can do both. My answer is no. The whole point of Andrew Yang's UBI argument is that if you increase the costs on businesses, they will start to act in manners that are unfavorable to workers. So the UBI takes care of the workers' needs while keeping the costs off the businesses. Well, that's my 2 cents on the issue, and I hope to see you again next time. Now, I do apologize for my extremely long hiatus. The good news is I may have found a faster production method to get my videos out there, but I have been my own worst critic. So I hope to become very frequent in uploading videos in the future. So with that, I am Prometheus, signing off.